Hello. Today I will feature something that has been also requested a fair amount, since I have seen a lot of comments about how weak the Zhao supposedly is after all the nerfs. So I'm of course featuring the tier 10 IGN cruiser, the Zhao. Now, I won't feature my build in this commentary. If you want to see the build, I can link it below in the comments. You can check my previous commentary where I'm still using the same build that I recommended back then. Now, a lot of people have been making the claim that the Zhao is very much weakened by these recent nerfs. Of course, the stealthfire nerf being really the main one. The Zhao hasn't really been affected in any other way. This nerf affected, of course, all stealth-firing ships, and for many Zhao players who relied much too heavily, in my opinion, on this, it's obviously a very big deal. But honestly, that's mostly because they relied too much on it, and if they haven't already adapted, now is the time to start adapting to the new playstyle and playing it much like any other cruiser, meaning no, you cannot always stealth fire, you need to learn to angle, you need to learn to dodge, you need to learn better positioning. These are all vital things for any cruiser player. In the past, Zhao players got away without having to learn any of these things. They could just sit at max range and happily farm damage without being spotted, without having to do anything, neglecting all these important lessons that most other cruiser players have to learn. So in that sense, I think the change is quite good. I see a gearing push up, I push up with him, let him do a lot of the scouting. And now, just because you can't stealth fire based on distance doesn't mean there aren't other ways to shoot from cover. In fact, in this case, it comes down to positioning. There's this handy little island down here. I see where all the opponents are, so I slowly push up behind the island while firing, keeping an eye out on my spotting, and I briefly got undetected, and I push up a bit deeper, and tada, I'm undetected. So now it's like the nerf never happened. I can stealth fire quite comfortably from here, and as long as I'm not spotted, well, this is pretty much completely safe for me. My first target was of course the battleship. The Zhao is fantastic at burning down battleships, but when the Grozovoi does show itself, I obviously pick a fight with him as well, because I want to help my gearing out, since the gearing is the one doing all the major spotting over there. And he's also slowing down their push a lot, which is fantastic for me, since my battleships are taking their sweet time of moving out from spawn at all. Now, this is one of the multiple ways that you can still stealth fire in the Zhao. You can use cover, you can use smokes. These are all very basic cruiser gameplay elements that people should know how to use, but if they haven't, it's time to start learning these, well, tricks, I guess, that pretty much every other cruiser has had to deal with, and only really the Zhao has been getting away with not having to deal with it because it was so easily able to sit at range and just spam. And ultimately, I think the nerf to the Zhao, well, the nerf to the stealth fire in general, even though I think it was an unnecessary buff or nerf to many other ships that really relied on it. There were some very squishy ships that heavily relied on it. For example, the Chapayev. The Zhao was one of the ships that really didn't need stealth fire, and I'm glad that they have gotten rid of it, because the Zhao is already very tanky. It has excellent range. It's tanky because the armor on it is so trollish. It has very good armor, and it's quite tricky to citadel, so you can quite easily dodge shells, and thanks to the railguns on it, you have no issues sitting at long range and dodging and just nuking people. So this ship really didn't need the stealth fire. So I'm happy that they've removed it, because it means people can't be as lazy in the ship in the past. In the past, you could sit full broadside and just spam. You didn't have to pay attention to anything. And with the changes, the removal of stealth fire, you actually have to be more engaged in the battles. You have to pay attention to your positioning, you have to pay attention to your angles, you have to pay attention to who's actually aiming and shooting at you. Like, there are all these things. Someone shoots, you have to dodge actively and so forth, and this means the player has to get more involved, which means of course there's more skill involved in using the Zhao. It's still one of the easier cruisers in the game to play, but at least there is more skill involved than just sitting undetected at long range and just farming, which is which was pretty damn ridiculous. So that change is a good one in my opinion. Now I push out from the cover since the closest ones are dead. I kill the Chapaev because that's a major threat to the gearing, so having it as a priority target is important, and then I follow up by focusing at the Grozovoi, because once again that's another big threat. I hit him 5 times, 2 fires, lots of damage of course, and that's one of the great things about the ZAO railguns. You're able to punish DDs very heavily if they show themselves. And since the gearing is the one doing some of the major spotting for us, I of course focus on priority targets for him whenever I can. Turn away, angle as I'm being shot at. A lot of people were targeting me, so I angle away, and that's something you need to learn. You can't just sail in full broadside. Henry 4, don't underestimate the AP. Slowing down, seeing if he will overshoot a bit if I slow down. And he does overshoot a fair amount because I slowed down and angled away. And that's something you need to learn, changing your speed, your course, all these things. Things that you were kind of, a lot of people were kind of forced to learn on the Ibuki because it wasn't nearly as good as stealth firing as the ZAO. But then they got to the ZAO and they got used to this lazy, super forgiving, super easy playstyle, and they kind of forgot all their lessons. And these are the people that are struggling, I think, the most with this change. They have gotten too used to getting away with this lazy, easy playstyle, and now that they can no longer get away with it, they are struggling heavily. And I do not think the ZAO is weak. I do not think the ZAO needs any buffs. I do not think the ZAO is in any way weakened by, I mean, of course it's weakened by the nerf, but I think it was very much needed because the ZAO is still absolutely one of the best cruisers in the game. There's no doubt that this ship isn't still absolutely fantastic. The massive range, the firepower, the concealment, the incredible railgun-like shells. It's still absolutely fantastic at what it does. You just have to pay more attention to your own ship while doing it, which is, in my opinion, just a good thing. Just a good thing. Things that make the game harder for very, very easy classes is something that I like. Something that you shouldn't be rewarding people with. You shouldn't have huge rewards for very little effort. That's why, for example, I greatly dislike the Yamato, because that ship rewards you with massive damage for almost no effort at all. The ship is so easy to play, so powerful. It has great accuracy, great guns, great turret positioning. Like, you just point and click in the Yamato and you do massive damage. And that's of course a very lazy playstyle and something I don't really enjoy in it. Also, it has great range as well, so you can get away with sitting far back and generally not really paying much attention to anything besides a point-and-click adventure and farming damage. These are all things I'm not a great fan of. Same reason why I hated the Shimakaze 20km torps before they nerfed them. You just sit in the backline, spam torps every couple of minutes. You don't have to pay attention to anything because you're so far away in safety. Like, these are lazy gameplay mechanics, lazy ways of playing the game, and shouldn't be rewarded. Already unlocked the Witherer. This is what, 9 minutes into the game, so the capacity of burning battleship is still the same as it was in the past. I'm chasing these guys since they are disengaging, but ultimately the ZAO excels at burning ships that push towards it. It's not nearly as good as at chasing, because the problem is, of course, every time you turn your ship to shoot your guns, not only do you lose a lot of speed, but it's also easier to hit someone who turns from angling to giving broadside. It's much easier to hit those shells. So chasing these guys is pretty damn hard, and dealing damage while chasing them is also fairly awkward. Also, if you're the one pushing in, they have an easier time hitting you, as I mentioned, but also torps become a bigger threat since you are pushing into torps, which makes them a lot harder to dodge. So instead of chasing these guys around, I'm repositioning to the south side, to our spawn side of the map, so that I can instead deal with these two battleships that are pushing in towards us. You always want to position yourself in places where you're receiving the enemy in the ZAO. Much like the Shimakaze that excels at when people push into you, the ZAO also excels at the same thing. Kiting away and spamming people chasing you is the best possible situation. It also gives you a lot more time to react to enemy shells, as it takes time for them to travel all the way to you and catch up to you as you're sailing away. So it makes life significantly easier for any cruiser player, but of course Zao players especially. Now Bismarck grounds, I make sure to get some volleys in on him. Once again, I'm undetected here, but ultimately I want to start burning down this Izumo as well. This is usually now a map like this, like Epicenter. This is considered hell for this, or Tears of the Desert. It's called Tears of the Cruisers because almost all cruisers suffer on this map. It's not a fun cruiser map at all because of how open it is. But amusingly, the Zao is probably the only cruiser in the game that actually likes Tears of the Desert, because this huge open space, this huge open area means that when you start firing on a battleship, he is incapable of disengaging in any easy way, especially if he's pushing in towards you. You see, if you chase someone, he can just turn right away, he can stop firing, turn away, and just flee. But if someone pushes towards you, it's very hard for them to disengage. They either have to stop, start reversing, gives you a lot of time to shoot them, or they have to turn away, which is something they really don't want to do most of the time, because with your allies there, turning away means giving broadside, which means eating a lot more damage. So there are multiple advantages to shooting people that are pushing your way. For those wondering why, I sometimes switch to torps on ships that have torps, even though the range isn't nearly enough. On the Zao, I use it as well to see the speed of the ship. If they're stopping, if they're accelerating, if they're moving forward, backward. Using the range or the predictive white line on the torps, which show you where you're supposed to aim the torps, is a good way of seeing how fast they're going and which direction they are going. So get used to quickly switching to it. I do it on all the ships that have torps. I do it on the French cruisers. I do it on turpits, for example. Like any ship that you can switch to torps, I tend to quickly estimate their velocity. Every now and then when I'm uncertain, just switch to torps to get a good idea. I burned down the 2 battleships that were pushing up towards our base, and now I start working on these guys. Once again, I slow down because I'm undetected. If you find yourself in a position where you're suddenly undetected, but you can still deal damage to the enemy ships, then just chill there. You're not in a hurry to move anywhere. I briefly get spotted, but I knew that the position I was in earlier, I was undetected. So we can just kind of keep farming. Yeah, I get undetected again as he moves past, and I'm farming without any real punishment for me. Also worth noting is that you might notice I'm very, very lazy. Well, you could call it lazy, but reluctant to use my self-heal on the Zao. And that's because you're very unlikely to eat a lot of devastating damage all of a sudden in this ship. In fact, most of the time you will eat a lot of chip damage, and you always pretty much have time to repair the chip damage back. Now, if you run Adrenaline Rush, as I highly recommend you should run on the Zao, since it's quite a slow reloading cruiser, so it gets a large benefit from using Adrenaline Rush. So the purpose, of course, of delaying your heal is that you gain the reload buffs from Adrenaline Rush, and you make use of them as long as possible. If you pop your heal and heal back all the health that you have lost, well then of course you gain a smaller benefit. So most of the time you will see me sitting with a lot of unhealed damage. Like for example now, I'm not instantly popping as soon as I take damage, but I rather make use of the boost for as long as possible. Now, however, 4 people are targeting me, which means I'm probably going to eat some damage here, since they're all trying to focus me down. So at this point, it's worth using the heal to make sure I don't accidentally get killed. But this is ultimately the position you want to be in a Zao. You want to be kiting away from the enemy, having them chase you, and having them waste volleys at you is also fantastic, because hitting a Zao sailing away is not easy. In fact, one of the major mistakes I would say these guys are doing is that all of them are shooting AP. The cruiser should be shooting HE. HE is surprisingly strong against the Zao, but first of all because unlike the troll, it doesn't get affected by the troll armor of the Zao that much. So not just the fact that you deal fairly consistent damage, you also set fires, and fires increase the spotting of the Zao, and being unable to disengage when you get super low on the Zao can be very, very punishing. But so far I'm pretty confident. I got 7k HP. It's unlikely any one of these will be able to punish me enough to really reduce that HP instantly. So I'm happily farming. I angle whenever I see shells. You see, because I'm sailing away, I have plenty of time to see these shells. I have plenty of time to turn away. The shells are coming my way. But I create distance, I sail away, and most of the shells splash harmlessly next to me. And that's something, of course, you need to learn. Always keeping an eye out. Using priority target is absolutely a must-have on the ZOW. You need to know how many people are targeting you. You need to know that you can disengage and so forth. But ultimately, I'm in a pretty comfortable position. I keep kiting away, I keep waiting for my heal to come back. I only have 6k HP. I'm happy none of them decided to shoot HE on me. But people are very focused on using AP on ZOWs, hoping to instantly delete a ZOW. But because of the troll armor on the ZOW, it's unlikely to happen. Like, you are not really going to be deleting any ZOWs. You saw that, a quick check to see how fast and where he's going. He's not going that fast, so I know I don't have to lead that much with my volley. My heal is finally up, so I'm gaining some health, so I start pushing back in. And I'm gonna start working on a Bismarck since he's the one who has my flank, and the Henry IV is obviously focused mostly on the Edinburgh that is also here in the spawn. But make use of the strengths of the ship. And if you have, and on the other hand, if you're a cruiser and you have to fight a ZOW, one of the best ways I found fighting a ZOW, for example, if I'm playing Moskva, is I just spam HE at it. ZOW only has 40.8k health. That's not a lot of health. And when you consistently splash HE on it, you deal damage, you start fires, those 40k health burn down real damn fast at tier 10, especially since almost everyone deals a lot of HE damage to it. So HE is a very hard counter to ZOW, if you can hit it. That's mostly the problem. Hitting the ZOW is quite hard, and a good ZOW player, most of your AP shells will only hit him angled and not really do any damage. But of course, HE doesn't care about angling, so you will deal consistent damage with HE. Bismarck used his repair earlier, I forced it, so now I just need to get a second fire on him. Now he's already pretty screwed. Note that I've slowed down quite significantly, and most of the time I'm baiting out his shells. If you look at the minimap, you can see I'm actually pointed towards all the rest of the ships, including the Henry IV. And only when he turns to shoot me do I turn into him, and most of the time I also slow down. Slowing down and turning in is a very good tactic of making the shells miss just like that. And at this point, my fires are going to burn him down and are going to finish him off. He's down, quickly burning down to double fire plus my HE volley, and someone else takes the kill, of course. But you want to always keep in mind your angling and avoid giving that full broadside. Sailing around in a straight line giving full broadside, well, if you've gotten to tier 10, you should already know that this is a death sentence to any cruiser, and not even ZOW's troll armor will necessarily save you in that case. Oh, I was hoping to drop some torps and burn down this Henry IV. You saw as soon as he started focusing me, I wanted to turn away and start kiting, because kiting away is the best way to deal with these ships. But ultimately, he also got stolen away. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but almost all my kills have been stolen away, and I'm a bit salty about it. But luckily, my team just takes it with humor, because, well, it is pretty amusing and pretty stupid at the same time. Looking at my damage, I have 266,000 damage accumulated in this game, and I only have 2 kills, because pretty much every single kill has been secured by someone else. Ultimately though, I'm back up to 15k health, which is like, what, 40% of my health pool, and I've burned through all my heals quite comfortably, but I never really felt like I was in any huge danger in this game. I was comfortably able to, I tanked some damage, which is what I wanted to. You kind of want to absorb damage, you want people to waste a bunch of volleys at you, try to kill you while you're dodging and just tanking them, evasion tanking, or letting your troll armor tank the volleys. You shouldn't be afraid to tank some of the damage, as long as you're not giving broadside. Broadside tanking is just stupid, but that kind of angled kiting away tanking, you can do that for so long in the ZOW before you actually get killed, and that's of course always has been and always will probably be one of the great strengths of this ship. The extremely trolley armor, the ship is very tanky as long as you remain angled. Of course, if you do face someone who is focusing purely HE on you, then life becomes a lot harder, because you kind of have to disengage and you have to focus on burning him down. But in this case, battleships especially are very focused on using AP against you, and against battleships, the Zao pretty much hard counters all battleships in the game. Anyway, game ends 266k damage. This was my first win of the day, which is always nice. I was farming. I needed fires done for the Invasion of Tulagi mission. I think you needed to do 25 fires on one stage, and I got 22 in this game alone, so pretty much got the mission done right away. Team score wise, 2.5k base XP, not that much, but then again, Epicenter doesn't really give that much base XP. It's a goddamn shitty mode, and I don't really like the game mode. Well, the game mode is okay on some maps, like on Trident the game mode is okay, but on huge open maps like this one, unless you're playing a Zao or a battleship, it's unlikely to be that much fun. And looking at the damage, of course, we can see I didn't bother using AP at all. 142k HE, 124k fire, and spotting. I did a bunch of spotting damage, something you don't really notice, but you kind of get it done. Meanwhile, 49k spotting damage and 2 million potential damage. Potential damage is shells fired your way. So you can see just how much tanking I did for the team, even though I only have 40.9k or 40.8k health. So, very squishy cruiser in that sense, but the real ability to tank it has is not to be underestimated. It's such a damage sponge, or well, potential damage sponge, and the well-played Zao is still, without a doubt, one of the strongest ships in the game, and the stealthfire nerf has changed absolutely nothing about this. Anyway, if you want my Zao build, I'll link the commentary of my previous Zao. I'll link my previous Zao commentary in the comments, and you can find my build at the end of that commentary as usual.